Well, hello everybody. Today this is going to be a slightly different video than normal. This is a topic that I wanted to talk about a lot, but have hesitated on because I think it's a little personal. Not that I can't generalize and have it be applicable to more than just myself, but that it is relatively personal. So it is sometimes difficult to want to broach a subject like this. However, um, whenever I have brought this up with people that I've known, it's clear to me that the vast majority of people out there are completely unaware about this or know very little about it. And so it is actually a topic that's worth looking at and putting some information out there. And that is, of course, as the title suggests, about foreskin restoration. Now, I've made two previous videos about how I feel about routine infant circumcision, and in fact, the last video that I posted was a satiristic, version of that. And that's a very interesting topic. I think that the topic of whether parents have the right to circumcise their children is a very interesting ethical question, one that I think has a fairly clear answer, at least from my perspective. But it's certainly one that can be debated and is debated, and it's something that I think, should be debated more. But I've made two videos about that already, and although I enjoy debating that topic, and though I proselytize that whenever I have friends who are maybe expecting to have kids, I've already put it out there. Foreskin restoration is a related but different thing. Um, so just to, put a little personal aside out there, I became aware of foreskin restoration as a possibility probably in 2014 or sorry 2013. If you look, the first video that I made on circumcision was in 2013, and that's when I became aware of the possibility of foreskin restoration. Um, Now, the first reaction people have is, I did not even know that's possible, that's a thing. And indeed it is. And I do want to talk about how that works, at least in broad strokes, later in this video. Another thing that people talk about and ask is, why would you want to do that? And there's more than one reason, and people often have different reasons for why they want to do it. The other thing I want to talk about, and that's prompting this video and why it's happening now, is that I've just read a book on foreskin restoration. Now, I've been doing foreskin restoration for about a year now consistently, and I wanted to wait until I'd been doing it a year before I made a video on it. I didn't want to make a video and say, I'm going to do this and I have no idea what it's going to be like. It's been a year and I can actually report, personal things that have happened. So the book that I read is an interesting book. It's a little dated. It was written 20 years ago. There's not many books on the topic. And I'll just show it here. Can you see the title? The Joys of Uncircumcising by Jim Bigelow, who's a psychologist. So the book was interesting, not so much in the details that it goes into regarding actual restoration, which it does. That is one area where I think his book is dated. The techniques that he outlines, there are several more that are probably more popular now than when he wrote this book. But he talks a lot about the history of foreskin restoration. Foreskin restoration is actually something that's quite old, that it's been going on for at least 2,000 years, explicitly, not just inferred or, conjectured. Um, so I guess maybe just to kind of go over that really quickly, circumcision is not just done by the Jews. That's who it's most famously done by, and that's where American circumcision today is drawing its direct genealogy goes through that. But uh, the first, we are pretty sure Jews were not the first people to um, practice circumcision. They are the first people that we know about who practiced foreskin restoration. Um, and it was practiced at least in the time of the Seleucids. When the Greeks conquered Judea and Palestine, uh, the Greeks had a rather negative view towards circumcision. They kind of viewed it as barbaric, and kind of a view that I would have as well. And many Jews who wanted to integrate within the greater Greco culture and later the Roman culture felt that it would behoove them in that um, with that goal in mind to restore their foreskins. He cites explicitly to take part in the Olympic Games, but I think it was more broad than that. And so Jews would restore their foreskins, and I'll describe how later in this video. But interestingly, there's a funny he relates a funny debate scholars have had If you've ever seen the probably the most famous sculpture in the world, Michelangelo's David, um, Michelangelo's David appears to be uncircumcised, and many people have said, "Oh, Michelangelo obviously made a mistake. Wouldn't he know David as a Jew would have been circumcised, and so the statue's wrong. He's probably going off of what the average Italian looked like at the time, which almost certainly would have been uncircumcised." And the book points out, this is something I did not know, is completely new to me, that the earliest form of circumcision practiced by the Jews, and he puts it at 2,000 years. Now, after reading Shlomo Sand's book, I think that the history of the Jews does not go back 2,000 years before Christ. I mean, the group probably goes back that far. The stories that are attributed to being that old are probably not history. They're probably more legendary. But just using that as a, the period of David, of King David and Solomon is like a legendary period. There might be historical antecedents to that. There might not be when they happened, up for debate. But we do know that the initial form of circumcision was a very mild form, where essentially only the very most end part, the very tip of the foreskin would be removed. The part that's called the pucker or the Frenard band, the very sensitive section of cells at the very tip of the foreskin on most people anyway. So the glands themselves would remain covered. And so Michelangelo's David is probably accurate to what David would have been like. Now, did Michelangelo know that? And the supposition of the author is that before he worked that long on a statue of that importance, he would know that. Maybe he didn't. That's kind of beside the point. Maybe he accidentally is correct because he was going off of Italians, but I think he would know that Jews were circumcised, so who knows? But fascinating that the original type of Judaic circumcision was a much more mild type. And if you have ever met somebody and I have, like I have a friend who was circumcised very, very mildly to the point where he believed he was uncut up until the time he was 20, when he had to have some kind of medical procedure, and his parents told him that he had been circumcised, and the doctor who did it simply did it in the most mild way possible, which is interesting. Um, so this friend of mine, he looks like he's uncircumcised. He is fully covered, at least when he's flaccid, and to the point where he believed that he was uncut, and actually doctors that he would meet thought he was uncut. Um, and actually, another surprising illustration of another interesting aspect of this entire thing, demonstrating the biases of the American medical establishment against foreskins. This friend of mine, while he was in college, had to go in for an unrelated procedure. He had to have some fluid drained from his scrotum or something. He was going to Duke, which is a good medical school, and just before he went under, they were applying an anesthetic to pass him out, or whatever, some kind of the laughing gas. And the doctor asked, as they were drugging him, "Hey, do you want us to circumcise you as well?" Even though he had no problem, there was no issue. He never voiced any problem, but the doctor saw what he took to be an intact penis, and his immediate reaction is that should be cut off, even though there was no problem, which I think is a very interesting and telling commentary on the state of the psychology of the medical profession in the United States. Anyway, interesting though, historically, if you're circumcised in that way, it's actually not difficult to pretend that you're uncut, and you may not even need to restore at all, or if you did, all you would need to do is elongate the foreskin slightly, and that might be enough to pass as uncut. And apparently, this is popular among less Orthodox Jews in the Seleucid period and in the Roman period. Now, there was a reaction against this. Some more Orthodox rabbis said, we need to really demonstrate our covenant with God. Now, it's not good if people are going to have their cake and eat it too, if they're going to demonstrate their covenant with God and then pretend like they're not really having a covenant with God in order to get ahead in this Greco culture that we are now dominated by. And so that is when they began to practice a much more severe type of circumcision. And he goes through, they have the part where you cut off the tip first, just like they were doing before, but then they peel the foreskin off the glands. Now, people who were circumcised at birth may not know this, but in the vast majority of males, when they're born, the foreskin and the gland are actually fused by a membrane. Now, sometimes it's not there. Sometimes some very young children can retract the foreskin, but in most they can't. And it's kind of a series of, as the child grows, the ability to retract the foreskin grows. But you have people who, even when they're 14, 15, 16, 17, can't fully retract yet. And it doesn't mean that they have phimosis. It doesn't mean that they have a problem. It just means that the membrane has not fully dissolved yet, but eventually that it will. And that you should never forcibly retract a foreskin. It would be sort of like peeling your fingernails off. Oh, I got to clean under my fingernails, so let's peel it back. That's a terrible idea. And in fact, a lot of harm has been done to uncut boys because American medical professionals were unaware of this and would say, no, no, you have to be able to clean under there. And so they would tell parents to peel this back, which is very damaging. Um, but anyway, this form of circumcision would then immediately peel back the skin and then remove everything so that the glands were completely uncovered. The entire point of which was to make it impossible to pretend that you were uncut if you indeed had been. What's interesting is that, for the hygienic reasons that people gave for circumcision in the American medical establishment in the late 19th and early 20th century, the much more mild form of circumcision would have worked just fine. But they, when this became popular, would go to rabbis, the people who were, well, it's not the rabbi, I forget the name, but sometimes it is the rabbi, but the person within the Jewish faith charged with performing the circumcisions. Doctors would go to them and say, like, here, you guys know what you're doing, show us how this is done. And they picked up that practice. And so the American style circumcision is the Orthodox rabbinical one, not because the doctors are necessarily Orthodox rabbis, although maybe that happens as well, but because that's where they picked it up from. And of course, the book has lots of like horrific horror stories of that. And there are many, many, and I didn't talk about this in other videos, even though it's not related to this one. Oh, I guess it sort of is. There's a lot of complications that happen because of that people are not aware of. Um, I have, and for those of you who don't know or whatever, most of my subscribers know, but in the case there are people here who don't, I'm gay. I've seen, more dicks than the average straight guy anyway, up close. And I've encountered over the years several people, and I don't meet that many people that this would indicate, basically it's happened enough that I think this must be relatively common, that have there's clear damage, there's clear medical issues to their penis, not even accounting for the fact that, their foreskins are gone. I mean, which is an interesting philosophical point for someone to say, it's not damage, we just cut off the foreskin. My satirical video was kind of about that, like scalping a person and be like, no, no, the head itself is not damaged. It's just the skin and the hair at the top that's just been removed. Right, that's a very arbitrary philosophical distinction, but more than that, I've seen a couple times something called a bridge, where basically you have a flap of skin that connects the shaft to the head that you can pass through, so maybe stick like a toothpick or a Q-tip for. And when I've seen that and I've asked the person what it was, they had no idea. This is someone who grew up with this feature. It's been, something that they've been aware of since they were a child. They've met other people, they know that other people don't have that feature, and they don't even know why it's there. And having read this book, I know exactly why it's there. That happens, once the circumcision happens, sometimes the newly cut tissue will refuse to the gland, and you can have a bridge. And sometimes you can have multiple bridges. And I've seen this a couple times, and they're not good. They're not very aesthetically pleasing, and they're not very healthy either. On top of that, whenever you peel the foreskin forcibly off of the gland, you get scarification, both of the foreskin, which is about to be cut off, so you're never going to see that scarification, but also on the gland itself, which is supposed to, in most cases, remain. And so you have guys, and this is everyone, even if everything else went fine, you're going to have scarification of your glands, and you can definitely see this. You can definitely tell the difference between a person who was circumcised at birth and one who wasn't. The glands are much, with an intact guy, the glands are much smoother. They're more supple. They're much more moist. They're not, they're not full of crevices and things like that. Whereas a guy who's on it, again, is very smooth. And you can even tell people who are circumcised later in life. So I've met a couple of guys who were circumcised in their 20s and in their late teens, after they had retracted their foreskins. And since their foreskins had already been retracted when the circumcision performed, there was no scarification to the gland. And so their glands, and this is, I would always be able to tell. I'd meet a person and I'd be like, you look like, were you circumcised in adolescence? And every time I've said this, they've said, yes, I was circumcised when I was 15, when I was 16. And so their glands are considerably less damaged as a result of that. So this is very common. In fact, if you're circumcised, I almost guarantee you that you have damaged glands. In addition to the fact that they have probably reduced sensitivity because of calluses forming on them afterwards. So an interesting book in that regard. And then he also talks about, he skips way ahead to like World War II, where Polish doctors and doctors in Holland would actually do surgeries on Jews to make them appear to be uncircumcised in an attempt to save them from being persecuted by the Nazis. And the procedures were very, very rudimentary and not very pleasant to read about, but apparently sometimes they were effective. Um, and that's just for a quick aside. Surgical foreskin restoration does exist. It is a thing, but it is not very good. There's high risks involved. The ability of surgeons to reconstruct and recreate a foreskin are very poor. Just ask anyone who's a transsexual trying to become a man. You know, the stuff that they can build for those people, it's very ingenious and it's impressive in itself, but it comes nowhere near the real thing. This may change with time. In fact, it likely will change with time. Also, just very briefly, there are obviously the possibility exists of regrowing foreskins using whatever stem cells or regeneration. We're already doing this with other body parts. Stands to reason it could be done with foreskins. There is a company that's trying to do this called Foregen. There's certain problems with that. Even if you could grow a foreskin, attaching it to yourself, that's one thing. Attaching the nerves is another. They don't have a way, as far as I know, of attaching nerves in a regenerated organ to you. So like you wouldn't feel anything from it really. Now it still cover your glands, which is good, and it's a very, I'm all for that, but who knows how long it's going to take. And it's right now there's certain things that we don't even have a time frame for when it can be resolved. So but there are people who get surgical foreskin restorations. It is possible, and they're doing better and better at it. However, it's very expensive, it's very risky, and the results are not very good. So the most common type of foreskin restoration is through gradual tension. So people ask, how is this possible, and why would you do it? So one reason people do it is that they have had problems, like the problems I described, or also many people, and this is even more common, were cut very tight. In fact, I think a lot of doctors apparently are going for this. The style of a lot of circumcisions in the United States engender this, and so people who have very tight skin when they have erections, or even when they're soft, this is difficult. This makes sex painful. This makes arousal painful. It makes it difficult to jack off. It makes it difficult to have sex. And many people who restore are people like that who want to have more skin so they don't experience pain like that. Now, that's not me. I did not have a very tight cut. I had more skin than most people do when I started, enough so that I was confused as being uncut a few times growing up and even today. Um, but um, so that's one reason. Another reason, some people just psychologically they feel like you know they want to be the way that they were born, and they psychologically want to see it. Some people aesthetically they want to look different. And in my case, this is something that I didn't really care about too much until I started meeting guys. And when I started meeting guys who were intact and playing with them and experimenting with them, um, it became very clear to me that they were living in an experientially different universe, that they were feeling things. I mean, obviously, we're talking about bell curves, and it's not all the same, and not all cut guys feel the same. Some cut guys feel more, some cut guys feel less, and the same thing can be said for uncut guys. That's absolutely true. Although I will say this, um, if you are circumcised and you feel fine now, the older you get, the less likely that will be. And this is another observation that I've made, is that the more sensitive cut guys are always the younger ones. And once you get past 20, 22, 23, you start to get less and less sensitivity on your glands. Now, guys who are circumcised in adolescence, their glands still look new. They look like uncut glands. But depending on their lifestyle, this will change. And when you get older, 30, 40s, 50s, this is when it gets really bad. And if it's very striking if you ever get a chance. Not that this is fun to do or anything, but it is interesting in this regard. If you ever see older men, who are cut, their glands become very, very weathered and worn, and you can, they age badly. Let's put it that way. Whereas guys who are uncut, even when they're older, obviously everything else ages, and I'm sure their glands age as well, but they appear much healthier. They are much, and I'm not. People are going to wonder how I know this. It's just because I have eyes, and it's out there, but you can tell. And in the forums that I've been on, there's two kinds of guys that are in them. Gay guys are a minority, but a much overrepresented minority. And so that makes sense to me because gay guys are going to be encountering dicks more often, or much more likely. Because your average straight guy may never really encounter other penises. Maybe they see them every once in a while, and not even that very often. But that's not the same thing as like interacting with one and finding out how sensitive or not sensitive it is, how it behaves, that sort of thing. So there's a disproportionate number of gay guys, which I think makes sense. The other category is older guys, older men, married heterosexual men who may be 40, 50, and at some point, the sensation and the pleasures of sex started to decline rapidly, and then they would restore and they would show marked improvement. So um, that's kind of the two groups that I see. You don't see too many guys who are younger, straight guys, although they exist as well. And I think that that's kind of like an interesting telling thing. Now, the other thing I think I need to say, and it's the elephant in the room, is that it's very difficult to qualify changes, um, because everyone has their own perspective and their own bias. And this is a very tricky problem, and it's one that it's very hard to get around. And I'll have to admit my own biases in making this video. But you'll, for instance, because people say, what my interest became, from what I can tell, the you guys who are intact are experiencing a lot more. And logically, to me, this makes perfect sense. It's an evolved feature. It's a trait that developed there by natural selection. There's obviously a reason for it. If you don't believe that and you're religious, then God put it there for a reason. Um, and also, just logically speaking, the argument of does it reduce sensitivity or not? How could it not? How could the removal of tissue have no effect on the amount of sensitivity? I mean, you'd be removing, at the very least, you're removing any sensory perception from the material that's gone, let alone the effect that that might have on subsequent, organs. And so, to me, like that seems like an almost undebatable argument. And if you look at the history of circumcision in this country, many of the original proponents proposed it on the grounds that it would reduce sexual pleasure, which is interesting. So my personal motive primarily was because I was very curious and very interested what this was like. I was very envious, having met uncut guys, that they were experiencing things that not only could I not experience, but I didn't even really understand. I may kind of read about them, and I can gauge the reactions of the people that I'm with and kind of try and infer what they're feeling, but I have to be very aware of the limitations of that. And it's very hard to verbally kind of explain these. If you ask a guy who's intact, well, what does it feel like? There's nothing in his mind that he knows to distinguish between what he would feel and what he would feel if he was circumcised. And so what he should describe, how he should describe it, it's very, very difficult to make any kind of qualitative assessment based off of that. And that was very frustrating for me, and it would be frustrating for anybody who was curious about it. And the other thing is kind of the people to ask, would be not people who are like, to comparing cut versus uncut sexual pleasure. You need to ask somebody who've experienced both. And unfortunately, people who've experienced both usually have some kind of stigma attached to one or the other. So let's say you were uncircumcised as a baby, but for some reason there was a problem with your foreskin, which is very rare, but it can happen. Um, or maybe it was a psychological problem. Maybe you were made fun of. Maybe you were alienated, or at least you felt alienated. People tend very often to overestimate the degree to which other people are talking to them. And I've talked to uncut guys who are still uncut, and most of them say at some point when they were teenagers, they wanted to get circumcised because they felt alienated. I was talking to another friend of mine. I was asking him, well, when did you start? Because right now he loves his foreskin now. But I was asking him, well, like, when did you start, playing with it in that way? It was not until like maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I was like, why? It was because I thought foreskins were weird. I thought that they were unusual. I thought that they were, yucky. And this is a guy who has one, who never had a problem with one, but because the society that he was in frowned on them in such a way, such an interesting way, actually, that he kind of had negative feelings about them. Well, if somebody like that gets circumcised, when they're an adult, which of course they have the right to do, um, that circumcision is loaded with a whole bunch of other psychological things, and it makes it very hard for them to rationally assess any kind of um, feeling changes that they feel. Also, as I've mentioned earlier, the effects of the circumcision might not be felt for many years. I mean, some of them will be felt right away, but like your head will remain sensitive for some time. And so, guys who get circumcised when they're 22, they're not going to feel any major desensitization of the glands that's going to be a problem until maybe 20 years later or 10 years later. And so 1 year later or 2 years later, they say, yeah, it's fine. I feel great. Everything's better. And I did meet a guy in Iceland, for instance, who was circumcised when I think he was 22 or 23, and he had problems. He had severe phimosis, to the point where it was causing it to, be bent funny or whatever, and he could never clean underneath. And which is not always a problem. I've met guys who are in their late 20s who have never seen their head. They've never been able to retract. It's not because the membrane is there, the membrane's gone. It's just the opening is too small and their head doesn't fit. And they've never had a problem ever. Um, and they don't want to get it changed, but that's again a personal thing. But yeah, so it, like this case from this guy from Iceland, like he had all these negative associations with his foreskin because there were problems with it, and so to ask him is kind of biased. Likewise, I have a bias. I've gotten to the point where I really think circumcision is at least routine male infant circumcision is a bad idea. Sometimes it might be medically necessary, but that's not what we're talking about right now. Just like I think getting a mammectomy is probably a good idea if you have breast cancer, I don't think it's a good idea to give mammectomies to every little girl who's born to stem the possibility that she gets breast cancer later in life, which is a very real and very deadly possibility, but one that we shouldn't prevent by such a mass amputation of healthy breasts. Um, and I don't know if any problems with foreskin could ever be considered to be as bad as death as, like what breast cancer could cause. But anyway, yeah, so like I have a bias there, and I can't deny that. So it's very hard to uh, to kind of separate myself from that, and I can't all the way. I can do as much as I can, but there's nothing that I can do that can undo it. Now, another interesting thing is I've talked to guys, and there's not very many people like this, but if you go on the internet and you look, you can find them. People who were circumcised in adulthood and then restored their foreskins later, so have had sex both as a fully intact person, as a circumcised person, and then as a person with a referred foreskin. And I've talked to a couple of people like this, and I've seen people who have done surveys, and you get rough qualitative or quantitative comparisons where most of them say sex when you're intact is something like a 10, sex when you're circumcised is something like a 2, and sex when you're restored is something like an 8. And that's very rough, and it's very hard to translate that into anything more concrete, but it's also very common. And sometimes they can qualify it more and say, this is what I couldn't feel, now this is what I can. This is how, they can be more detailed than that. I won't speak for them because I'm certainly not in that position. But it definitely got me interested. So I guess after all that, the reasons I'm very interested in exploring that element of my humanity as much as I can, as much as possible, if it ever becomes possible to restore even better with gene therapy or whatever, I'd be interested in that, but that's a long way off. So what can you do? Well, first thing, here's what you can't do. If what you can do. So your foreskin is skin. It's specialized skin at the very tip. The Frenor band is a special type of cell. You have your frenulum, which is a special formation. But most of the skin on your foreskin is skin, and your skin can expand. And people seem like, what? When a woman gets pregnant, when you gain weight, when you gain muscle, when you grow, your skin expands. Basically, when your skin is put under tension, somehow the cells in your skin can detect this and they start to divide if the tension is persistent. So if you, very quickly like do that, probably didn't expand any skin. However, if I attached a clothespin on this and left it like that, and presuming I didn't have it so tight that it was causing any damage, over time the skin there would stretch. The same thing that happens is when you gain weight. Your belly slowly expands. The skin isn't going to tear and rip unless you're just covered in scar material. And that gentle tension over time will cause this. And there's no reason that the skin on your penis can't feel that as well. If you apply gentle tension over time on your penis, the skin on it, not on the skin shaft around your penis rather than the penis itself. Um, Again, making the same. Did I just make the same error as the circumcisers? Yes, maybe. But like you can grow the skin on the penis, and you can grow it, hypothetically as far as you want. So if your goal is just to not have such tight skin, you can tug on the skin, and over time it can become loose enough that you don't have the tightness anymore. If your goal is to have the head of the penis covered when you're soft anyway, you can keep stretching, and eventually over time the skin will grow and cover the head. And if you want to have coverage when you're erect, well, if your erect length is 3 inches longer than your soft length, well, you got to keep stretching. But if you stretch 3 more inches of skin, you'll be able to do that. Um, the things that you can't do is replace tissues that are specialized that are gone. This would be like the Frenar band, the pucker at the tip of foreskin. If even the smallest amount of circumcision, like the friend that I referred to earlier, those cells will be gone, and you can't regrow those cells. Hypothetically, I suppose if there was a remnant left, they could also be stretched, but there's almost never a remnant left. I've heard that it happens, but it's one in many, many millions. And it would be kind of weird if you had like half a Frenar band. I'm not sure how that would work, and if it might make sense to just I don't know what you could do. Maybe surgery. I don't know, but that's very, very rare, I'm told. I've never seen it. I've never heard of anyone having. All I've ever heard is that it's, in the one in millions that ever happens. Um, the other thing is the frenulum. What happens to your frenulum when you're circumcised varies a lot. There are some people who their frenulum is basically undamaged, and there are some people where their frenulum is basically completely obliterated and it's gone. And if it's gone, you can't regrow it. If it's partially gone, you can only keep the portion that's there. And if it's all there, then good for you. You've got a lot going for you then. And so those are things you can't do, but you can recover the head. Now, once you recover the head, what tends to happen is the gland become more sensitive. The gland is goes through a process of called keratization when it's exposed. Your gland is supposed to be covered by your foreskin, and when you're circumcised as a baby, it is immediately then exposed to your diapers and then your clothing and your sheets, and over time it becomes numb and desensitized, and this gets worse and worse with age to the point where it becomes sexually dysfunctional for a lot of people later in life. And even for people who are younger, it's less functional than otherwise would be. On top of that, the inner foreskin, the skin between the surface of the skin that touches the gland, is also very sensitive. Now, this often remains after circumcision. However, it's now exposed, it's on the outside. It's usually the section of skin between the circumcisional scar and then the base of the glands. And this varies a lot on how much is left on people. But if you have any left, that also can expand. And this is also very sensitive. And what happens once they're covered again is they become vastly more sensitive. The other thing is the sexual function of the penis is to slide in and out of the shaft tube, the skin tube. I forget the name. There's a term for this, but it was one of the very first things that I actually got me interested in the topic. I was talking to a friend of mine in Iceland, a straight friend, and just curious about foreskin in general. And I had asked him, what was his favorite, not thing about foreskin, but his favorite, most sexually pleasurable thing that he could do. And he said that it was to move the head in and out of this tube of skin. He says that motion was extremely pleasurable to him, and pretty much the most pleasurable thing that he experienced, which not everyone will report. But of course, from a circumcised guy, you hear that and you're like, what is that? What is that? I don't understand what that means. um, exactly, you don't know. You say, oh, I feel fine, and then you realize you don't even know what something like that feels like, and you can't even imagine what this guy's talking about. Well, if you restore, you can feel that again, at least to some degree. And as it turns out, sounds like you can feel to it to a very large degree. So um, how do you apply tension? Well, you can apply tension lots of ways. There's lots of ways mechanically to generate tension on your penis. There's a lot of debate among people who restore on how much tension and how long. So there are some people who say you should try and keep it under gentle tension as much time as possible. In fact, this book basically says you want very, very slight, mild tension, not enough to hurt, not enough to be painful, basically all the time. As much as you can at night. It's difficult when you sleep because it can be dangerous that if you get a nocturnal erection or if you roll over and you're not paying attention, if you have the wrong type of situation down there, you could cause a problem. But during the day, it's pretty easy to do. And the reason that he gives in the book, and I think it makes a lot of sense, is that this is the type of tension that's going to most likely happen naturally. So when a woman gets pregnant, she doesn't just suddenly need 10 times more, well, whatever, uh, 50 more square inches of skin, in one day. She's very gradually adding, a couple millimeters a week, or not even that much. And that's kind of the rate that we're talking about. We're not talking about, um, a really tight expansion. Your body isn't going to experience that normally, and so that's his goal. However, many restorers think that higher tension over smaller intervals of time is better. So you have a lot of guys who will use like maximum tension for half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, something like that. And unfortunately, there's not any hard science on this. It's not like weightlifting where there's some rough scientific estimate on what the best number of sets and reps are. Even though there's some debate there, there's at least a good idea of where to start. There just hasn't been the research into this for people to really know. And I think also the anti-foreskin mentality of the medical institution in this country is also really contributing to that, because they look at it like this is like not a good thing, that it's good to be cut and being uncut is not good. And why would you want to go that way? Why would you want to go back to something that's problematic? And I don't know, that's not the only reason. There's not a high demand for it. Most guys who are cuts are just say that they're happy the way that they are. I think that's a statement made in ignorance and doesn't address ethical questions about circumcising your infants. But um, be that as it may, there's not a high market demand, and so, and also there's a lot of shame. A lot of people are not willing to talk about it, which is one reason I was making this video. Because there are people who are doing it. I've met other guys who restore. They do exist. They're just not very public about it. And so a lot of this is kind of happening. I don't want to say black market, but um, very home industry type behavior. People are building their own devices and marketing them in a small way, and they're not proselytizing that much. They're not talking about that much, and they're not, it's very, and it's something you can do on your own because, um, it's not a complicated, sophisticated process. Applying tension to your skin is not something that requires an engineering degree or brain surgery skills. So one of the methods that people to use that's the cheapest is just manual methods, just using your hands. Um, and I've met a person who did this. I know a guy who, when if you were to see him in the locker room, you would think that he was uncut, but he was cut. But as a kid, he just developed a habit of basically tugging on the skin. He was loosely cut enough that he had basically a remnant, a very small a bit of foreskin, if you will. And when he got older, it slowly got longer as he was a child, just because he played with it so much and tugged on it so much. When he got older, he got interested in foreskin restoration and just became like uh, cognizant that's what he was doing. And at this point, he looks like he's uncut. You know, and he didn't have to buy a device. He didn't have to have surgery. He didn't have to use tape or balloons or anything. He just used his hands. And there are other people who have done that. The problem is that requires you to use your hands, and most people don't have the time to spend a couple hours a day tugging on their foreskins. It's very difficult to do that in your lifestyle for most people. There are people who make it work, who maybe, every time they go to the bathroom, every time they go to bed, every time they wake up in the morning, every time they take a shower, every time they're in the steam room or the sauna, or maybe if they're in a lunch break. If you make it a habit, you can over time get progress through that way, but it is very difficult. To help aid in this, to give us the freedom of doing more with our having a normal lifestyle, people have developed devices that they can use. So there are devices, and I'm not going to list them all here, but there are devices that use balloons. There are devices that use weights. There's a lot of devices that use tape. In fact, in this book, he says when you start off, most people should just be using tape. Um, there's dual direction devices that apply tension in two directions. There's elastic bands. There's all kinds of stuff. And for anyone who's interested, I would suggest you just start looking into them, or ask me. I can try and direct you to, as best I can. Different people like different things, but basically anything that can apply tension over time that's not going to hurt you. Too much tension, causing a pain. These are counterproductive. You don't need to go that far. It's not going to help. Um, Now, the next question a lot of people have is how long does it take? Well, unfortunately, there's too many variables to really say for any individual person. It depends what you consider the end result. Some people just want to have looser skin and they don't want any coverage at all. Well, that doesn't take as long as if you want to have coverage when you're flaccid. If you want to have coverage when you're erect, that takes even more time. It depends on how much skin you start off with. It depends on how big your gland is. If you have a gland that's 1 inch long versus an inch and a half long. Well, the guy with an inch and a half long gland, assuming everything else was identical, which would never happen anyway, would need to stretch their skin enough to grow for another half an inch, which that could take months. Um, so, there are people who in just a couple weeks were able to get enough looseness that they stopped. In fact, there's another person on YouTube who's uploaded a video, and uh, he uploaded one saying he was interested in trying it, and like a year later, he did an update video and said he was done. He wasn't doing it any longer because the problem had resolved itself, and it took him like a month or 6 weeks or something like that. There are other people who did it. It took 20 years. And another major factor in this is, how consistent are you? A lot of people who restore, it's very difficult. You basically have to consistently do it all the time, at least, if not every day, multiple times a week, for many hours. And that's just difficult for a lot of people to work into their routines and become consistent about. And so you do have people who have taken 20 years. And you have people who have worked at it 4 or 5 years and have very little to show for it. And it's just very frustrating. We don't know enough. Some people may grow skin faster than others. Some people, different techniques may or may not work. It's very frustrating in the degree of indefinite scientific evidence. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence. Oh, this person tried this method and it worked very well. This other person tried that same method, didn't work so well. So progress in terms of growing skin, I would just caution people who's ever interested. You want your goal to be developing good habits and making slow but steady progress. But this will probably take, I would say, 2 to 3 years, kind of minimum, if you're very consistent about it. And depending on where you're starting and where you're going from. Some people may be starting with a lot more and not need as much time. I know a person that again, one of the few people that I've met in real life who is restoring, and honestly, he looks like he's uncut. And he said he's only been doing stretches for like 3 months. And I don't know how that's possible, but he has lots of pictures to prove it. There are other people where I've seen progress pictures where it doesn't look like anything changes for 2 years, and then all of a sudden, major progress happens. And I don't know, did they change their routine? Was that just a really good day that they took that picture? It's very frustrating to gauge progress because the geometry of the penis changes a lot throughout the day. The temperature, the humidity, the degree of arousal. Let's say you grow a millimeter of extra skin, but one day you're half an inch bigger. That millimeter of skin is not going to show up anymore. It's still there. You have made progress, but you won't be able to see it, and you probably won't be able to measure it. And there are people who try and measure it, and there's hundreds of different like angles you could go at it, and it's just very, very difficult to chart your progress until there's been quite a bit. So how long? That's I think if you're very consistent about it, you should be able to make substantial progress in the course of, we're talking a year, couple years, something like that. If you're not consistent about it, then it will take, exponentially much, much, much longer. So I've been doing it consistently for about a year. What can I say personally? In terms of growth of skin, I'm not measuring very much. I don't know for sure. I sometimes think that I see more. There's indications that there's more. There are certainly periods when I'm like, okay, that looks different. But I'm aware of my own biases, and I can't objectively do this. I have tried experiments where I have met people that I haven't seen in a long time. I've hooked up with guys that maybe I haven't seen in a year or 2 years. I'll make a point not to tell them that I'm restoring. I won't mention that I'm trying to regrow anything, and I'll just see if they notice, and they have. Some of them have been like, "Wow, what the hell?" So apparently, progress is made enough that a relative, that someone I haven't seen in a long time can notice without being prompted by, me letting them know that I'm working on it. But there have been other much more tangible progressions. So a lot of, the kind of the goal is to have the glands covered with skin. You don't have to be restored though to be able to do that. You can artificially cause this. You can do what's called retaining, which is basically where you use the skin that you have to cover the glands using either tape or various devices. There's silicone cones. There's lots of things you can use. Um, there's artificial foreskins like that are made out of silk. Silk isn't your skin, but it's less abrasive than your clothing, and so wearing something like a silk pouch over your head can help. There's a product in Canada called the Manhood, which essentially does that, and which I bought about a year ago, and I will say that sensitivity has increased enormously, and also qualitatively. That within about 2 weeks of wearing the Manhood, I started feeling things that I hadn't felt before. Not necessarily erogenous sexual things, but just maybe a draft, cold air, maybe water running off in the shower, something like that. Then within a month or two, major increases in sexual function. And basically, it's been about a year since I started restoring. And I've had repeated breakthroughs in sexual performance, being able to achieve orgasm in situations and circumstances that I wasn't before. Um, I don't want to be too detailed here, but very interesting. Um, the intensity and the length of my orgasms have increased enormously. They feel much better. They're much more powerful. Again, how much of this is placebo? How much of this is psychological? I can't say. All I can say is that things that physically never happened before and never did happen before, despite me trying to make them happen, have started happening. And they've started happening without me even making an effort to make them happen. And basically, I can't even relate. Probably at least half a dozen things have happened that, again, never happened previously and now are. And I guess people are probably really curious what they are. But, use your imaginations, people. If anyone's really interested, they can ask, and I'll consider answering. But like, uh, it is it is very interesting, and I will say, having retained now for a while, I've become very used to my skin, my gland being within my skin, and it feels very like that's where it's supposed to be, which makes sense, like evolutionary speaking. But it feels wrong not to be there anymore. And it was funny because when I would have said, oh, it feels like it just feels right. It just feels like it's at home there, and it feels comfortable, and it just feels good. It just feels right. And when I read the book, he says that's what a lot of people say, that that's a common relation. So yeah, it's something to consider. I mean, if you're happy with the way you are, whatever. Like, I think one of my reasons I got into this is because I'm, very curious and very cerebral, and like, it really made me very, very wonder. I very much wondered, like, what is this like? What would it be like? And I didn't know, and I wanted to know. And a lot of people, they don't look at life that way, and they don't look at themselves that way. Uh, for me, uh, I became aware of restoration about 2 years, or well, almost 3 years ago now, and you know, part of me was like, well, there's nothing I can do. But then I realized that there was something I could do about it. And I realized that restoration will never make me intact. It will never undo the circumcision. It will never make me uncut. But it can regain an awful lot. And the estimates that I was seeing were quite a bit. And, going back to the maybe 80-90% of what a restored person would feel like. And that's coming from a person who, that's an estimate of somebody who was intact and then was circumcised and then restored afterwards. Um, and I felt like, and this is very common, like, what I don't want to just be upset about being circumcised the whole time and not do anything about it. It's kind of like the person who's fat and out of shape, who's like, I really feel bad that I'm fat and out of shape, but I'm not going to join a gym or go on a diet. That's something you can actually do. You can actually have, it's not easy, you can't do it right away. And in fact, the two I think are very analogous. You can't just go to the doctor and become in shape. But if you change your lifestyle and start working at it, you can get there. It just takes a couple years, depending on what you're going for anyway. And foreskin restoration is the same way. You can lament that you were circumcised, and I certainly do. Um, but there's stuff you can do to fix it if you want. Now, it's a commitment in time and an effort, not so much in money. It doesn't cost that much. The devices tend to be relatively cheap. It's rare to have to spend more than $100, and most of them will last as long as you need them, uh, like or nearly that long. So, we're probably talking, even if it takes you many years, and even if I factored in the cost of the books and stuff, it's going to be end up costing probably like less than $400. And it could be done for free. I mean, there's people who they don't read any books, they don't buy any tape, they don't buy any devices, and they still do it. All it takes is time, and ingenuity. So anyway, this is a long video. There's a lot more that could go into it, and the details. I don't know how good that'll be. I'll just say that in 1 year, there's been a lot of progress on my end in terms of sexual function, in terms of sexual pleasure. It's been very interesting. I wish that I could, objectively say how much of the increase in function is psychological and how much is, actually physical. Although, does that really matter in the end? That's a different question as well. I think it must be at least some physical. I certainly think it is, as far as I can tell it is, but then again, that's my bias and my perspective, and I can't see beyond that. I can't, become a third party objectively looking at everything. But it is, that's as much as I can say. So, if you're a regular subscriber and you weren't interested in this, I'm sorry. It's not what I normally talk about, and it's not what I'm going to be talking about all the time. I just thought it was an interesting topic. It's one that I want to get out there. I also think that this will be good for me because hopefully people will watch this video in the future, and if they leave comments and ask how I'm doing, it will keep me motivated to keep going, because I do think this is a process that's going to take a couple years. Although I have made progress, I don't see myself being done anytime soon, and I want to keep going until I am done. I only wish that I'd started sooner. Kind of the same thing about joining a gym. I wish I had done it 10 years ago. I wish I had started doing this 10 years ago. And the few guys who are younger, who are not gay, who are into restoring, I noticed, seem to have an attitude that is basically anticipating that. I feel fine now. I have lots, and I've had guys tell me this. I have lots of sensitivity, but I don't want to have to spend 5 years doing this when I'm 45. I'd rather do it when I'm 20 so that I can enjoy the rest of my time period. Because while you're doing it doesn't mean that you can't do anything. The fact that you're restoring doesn't inhibit your ability to, be sexually active or be having a good time or anything else in the interim. It just means that you'll have a restored foreskin much sooner than you would if you started that many years later. So anyway, that's it. It's a long video. Apologize for any of you who are subscribers and didn't want to hear this, but there it is. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask. There's plenty of resources available online that I'm sure most of you would be able to find if you looked. But if you want suggestions, go ahead and ask, and I'd be happy to refer you. There's some very helpful communities out there of people who are restoring. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of testimonials. Um, and there's a lot of advice. So anyway, that's pretty much it, and I'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.